Yeah, I mean, sounding like a fucking British imperial spokesman from the Edwardian days. Now, I am willing to countenance a certain amount of mass murder in a good cause, but I really cannot stomach. I really will not abide any disruption to maritime trade.
This is just the problem that we keep facing over and over and over again.
That your takes suck, and people point it out? So, okay. Here we go. It's Vaush. Against genocide, against people trying to stop genocide.
I'm getting like raked over the coals on Twitter again. I wish I could talk to somebody about
Oh, I mean, it's so terrible for him. He's getting engagement. I want to see them
like justify their arguments in real time, but like, man.
Yeah, that's right. Nobody has justified their arguments of why it is actually a good thing for there to be sanctions on Israeli shipping while Israel is committing genocide.
And the Houthi shit is like so. It's basically like the split is like people thinking that I'm like a insane, horrible neocon, whatever. Yeah, but a lot of people being like, oh wow, Vaush is like the only sensible person. But the people who are saying that are like sock dems and liberals, which is like,
yeah, that should tell you something. If if the only people saying that your take is good are people you have no respect for, that's a sign that you've had a bad take. Yeah, I mean, like, literally, it's not surprising. Although, of course, in the US, there has been this really impressive effort to avoid acknowledging that these sanctions are specifically targeting Israeli shipping. It's like you're not allowed to say that in the media, or at least nobody does. It's this really impressive, like, ideological conformity you find. And it's not allowed to be linked in any way to the genocide. And we're not supposed to know as well, or at least discuss the fact that they weren't doing this before the genocide, and they have said they will stop as soon as the genocide stops. And in this context, it's also worth remembering that there has been a total blockade on shipping to Gaza for 17 years now. Literally nothing gets in. You know, humanitarian aid vessels have been attacked. Palestinian fishing boats trying to go out to get, just food because they've been put... the euphemism Israel has been using for 17 years is they've been put on a diet, which is to say, for 17 years, they have not been getting enough nutrition, and not enough has been allowed in. They've had to supplement it with smuggling, and when they try to fish in their fucking territorial waters, the Israeli Navy shoots at them. So, I mean, now, unlike the Yemeni sanctions, which only apply to the Red Sea because it's the only place Yemen can reach, Israel has plenty of other ways for maritime traffic to reach them. It's just that they're way more inconvenient because they require you to go all the way around the fucking Cape of Good Hope. Yeah, this is his opener.
Like, pretty offensive to me, I guess. Fighting them is supposed to be World War III, isn't it? Yeah, bombing Yemen. It's not just Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, why? That's just... I mean, you just laugh about that because, I mean, it's just civilians in the poorest country in the Middle East who have already been through a genocidal siege imposed by proxy, a massive mass murderous war by proxy via Saudi Arabia, But, so, I mean, what's a few more fucking bombings of a densely populated urban area? Really?
Lefties, the entire Discord and Majority Report has fallen for the brain rot. I feel like the community Majority Report has a very large number of leftists in it. Bombing Yemen is just tradition at this point. Yeah, look, it's just a bit of fun,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's supposed to be a good thing, Vaush. Are you, not able to read the room of your self-selected audience of dickheads?
Lonerbox said you were the only one with good takes on this. It's just...
That should be a fucking warning! When people whose takes suck say, wow, that guy's got a good take, that's when you are supposed to go, turn off your camera, turn off your microphone, make a pot of tea, and think about it. Because something went wrong. Because if that's who's praising your takes suck.
Again, like, it's just such a, like, easy layup, you know? It's so, I don't know.
It's an easy layup. Supporting the U.S. bombing Yemen in order to defend their right to genocide Palestinians, that's an easy layup. And the only reason that so many people are pissed off at him, even, like, I mean, Majority Report, my impression is there's probably a fairly strong, like, liberal SOCDEM contingent there. I mean, I would not exactly call that a radical, like, revolutionary leftist outlet. I mean, don't get me wrong, they have some very good stuff. They've done some very good stuff. I've actually watched a fair bit of Majority Report. But they're not, I mean, I wouldn't exactly say that they're revolutionaries, and I wouldn't imagine that that's the audience they attract. And even they're saying, yeah, obviously it's a good thing that Yemen is trying to sanction Israel. Loser box. Yeah.
Wrong, yes. Everyone's wrong with me.
See, again, this is one of those moments, Vaush, where you should say, wait a second. Like, actually think about this. Like, are you missing something? That's what you do. When the only people that are actually in agreement with your take are people you're sort of embarrassed to be agreeing with, that's not a good sign, usually. That's a sign that it is time for self-examination.
Unironically on this issue. Kind of, usually uttered ironically, in this case, uttered sort of half-sincerely, tentatively. I'm trying the words on
tentatively,
with a bit
so
of seriousness to see
is that like the sign of maybe a little, like, wisp of introspection coming in there, where maybe he is willing to allow that perhaps he's getting this one totally fucking wrong? That actually perhaps this is a horrible fucking take?
In my mouth. My main problem is that it won't really deter the Houthis that much. Well, that we'll see, right? Like that.
That's your problem with it? That it isn't going to deter Yemen's sanctions on Israel? That's your problem with it? I mean, Biden, if you might have seen this already, chat. Somebody pointed out, because the Houthis actually, the government of Yemen said, actually, we think this is kind of cool because we've been fighting the U.S.'s fucking puppets. It's nice to actually be in a direct confrontation with the organ grinder for a change. They were actually, like, I think the head of the government, I forget his name, said that it was actually kind of an honor. And that they were obviously not going to be fucking backing down. And by the way, I mean, leaving aside the genocide thing, leaving aside the fact that they had every right to do this and that it was a good thing they were and are doing, leaving aside all of that, if the idea is to make sure that shipping can go unmolested through the Red Sea, one thing that might actually not work very well there is to have an all-out war in the Red Sea. Because now people are definitely going to have to avoid the fucking Red Sea, because not only do they have, not only is there the possibility they'll be mistaken for an Israeli ship or something like that, but there's the possibility that the U.S., with their fucking indiscriminate approach to firepower, will just sink somebody's ship, thinking it's Yemeni, and then say, yeah, my bad. But yeah, so this person in chat is saying that, yeah, it's the thing is it won't even deter the Yemeni government from their sanctions. Like, but Biden actually had that put to him today. He's like, somebody asked him, do you think that this is going to cause Yemen to stop sanctioning Israeli shipping? She's like, and he goes, no. And so, they go, are you going to be continuing it? Yeah. Like, and this is not the first time that Biden has just, like, or a Biden official, I should say, an administration official, has just openly admitted that they're doing, like, at this point, the mass murder is the point of the thing. Like, the State Department's chief ghoul. Yeah, Vaush hates the drama. Yeah, I totally buy that. You know, nobody hates drama like Vaush. He's just such a small bean. But so Blinken gave this interview in which he said that there is no military solution to the Palestinian resistance. At the same time as, of course, he's defending the official policy that is supposedly, we're supposed to pretend that the policy is about getting rid of the Palestinian resistance, which would be a bad thing even if that were honestly what were going on, when obviously it's not. If anybody has not actually, if anybody's capabilities have not suffered in these 100 days of just fucking carnage, it's the Palestinian resistance. They're going from strength to strength. I mean, seriously, check out the jelly beans on Electronic Intifada. Not only are their tactics just going just more and more sophisticated, more and more, like, daring and brave and everything, their fucking production values are going up as well. I mean, so obviously this is not hurting the resistance. But you know, fucking Blinken, absolute piece of shit, that he is, says, yeah, I mean, obviously there's no military solution to the Palestinian resistance, but we're gonna keep killing them, and killing Palestinians by the tens of thousands, all the same. I mean, what are you gonna do? Schönen guten Abend.
That is a meaningful question, you know, to what extent will it be effective? Seeing Emma from MR defend them was pretty disappointing. Yeah.
Disappointing? Like, what kind of fucking people are disappointed that somebody would defend an effort? See, correct me if I'm wrong. Has Vaush come out against the various fake-ass humanitarian interventions that the U.S. has done? I mean, I can't say that I have a comprehensive knowledge of his takes on that. I haven't heard him speak on it. But chat, help me out here. Like, the bombing that was supposedly about the Kosovo of Albanians and was later quietly admitted by a top Clinton official to be about imposing neoliberal reforms on Yugoslavia, you know, Libya, all, you know, on those. Has he taken a stance against those things, or has he been for those? My feeling is that he would probably be for them because of the shitheadedness, but I don't know for sure, and I am I'd like to feel free to school me on this if I'm wrong there, because then at the very least you kind of have the beginnings of some kind of a morally consistent position, even though actually those aren't the same thing. It's a shitty analysis that says they are the same thing, but at the very least it would be consistent. But I have my feeling is he was probably okay with all those things.
Yeah. Emma's kind of an idiot, TBH. No, she's not. Emma,
again, this is a sign that maybe you should reconsider your position. If people who you're not going to, like, who you have to defend against claims that they are, ableist claims that they're a bit of an ableist slur, why do they defend them? Somebody in his chat asks. I don't understand why leftists can support them. Oh, because they're sanctioning a genocidal regime that is carrying out genocide, and they're like the only people who are actually taking any kind of practical action. That's
the majority report broadly, probably everyone. I think this is like post-Iraq war brain rot, to be honest. It's just people are very isolationist right now. And
Oh God. I mean, here we go with the wonderful takes here. See, opposing the US, just carrying out wars of aggression in the rest of the world, a position, it's worth noting, that is shared by the overwhelming majority of the world's population, especially in the regions where the US carries these wars out. That's isolationism. When you agree with the entire world, that's isolationism. When you advocate a position that totally isolates the US internationally, that's when you're not an isolationist.
And like isolationism can lead you accidentally to some good outcomes and takes, but in many cases, I think it leads you to some rather bad ones. You know, I don't know. It's just.
I mean, like, the only people who use isolationism, this is the sort of thing you find like liberals in like The Atlantic or The Economist saying. Like, they won't consider that people don't that people have a problem with the US murdering huge numbers of people in other countries and starting wars that end up lasting for decades. They can't they can't wrap their heads around that, and if they acknowledge it, also, it runs into the problem that actually that's kind of a decent take to have. It's just kind of obviously a decent position. But so they say isolation.
Unironically post Houthi propaganda featuring their child soldiers and praising the children. I know what post.
And not a child. Actually, he's 19.
Leftist. I think that was just like.
Actually, he's fucking 19, and it wasn't Houthi propaganda. It was his own personal TikTok. Britain has 16-year-olds in the army. The US has a JROTC program where they're like, in violation of the International Convention on the Rights of the Child, which the US doesn't actually accept anyway. They, are recruiting fucking tweens. A 19-year-old is not a child soldier. And as Hassan Abi pointed out, he's got his own Twitter. I mean, it's all in Arabic, but it's there. Like, I mean, you can... He's posting directly. There was a good interview. Vaush was really pissed off at Hassan for doing this interview, apparently, where you actually get to hear this guy speak for himself about why he's doing what he's doing. It's sort of an awkward interview because the interpreter isn't really, not exactly acting like a professional interpreter. And there's some misunderstandings, and of course, this young guy who is patrolling the seas for Israeli ships has absolutely no reason to trust a streamer from the US in the first place. But it was him explaining that why he's doing this, why he's putting his life on the line to enforce these sanctions, is that he stands with the Palestinians. And, you really cannot fault that. And it just happens that he's also, hot as fuck.
I think that was a person who has other ideological, another axe to grind. I saw somebody posting the Houthi flag, curse upon the Jews, that one, and they were a Muslim living in London. What, by the way, really quick question.
Okay, so first of all, Vaush doesn't need to be talking about anti-Semitism. He's not demonstrated that he can be trusted to discuss the issue. Because he says some really, anti-Semitic shit. Let me see.
Is it with Muslims in London who are literally Hitler? Is it because...
Literally, yeah, that's a great take right there. Because, obviously, the point of reference for, like, relations between white Christians and European Jews is exactly the same as the point of reference for relations between European Jewish settler colonial regimes and, and Arab people. Like, never mind. Let's just remember Israel specifically had a policy of stealing Yemeni Jewish babies. That was a thing. Like, Yemeni Jews are not happy with Israel because of the stealing of the babies and all sorts of fucked up shit like that. Hello, Adria.
Because, like, the broader UK population has done a bad job with integration, so there's this, like, hyper...
Oh, wow! Okay, so we're gonna get in just some regular-ass racism here. A bad job with integration. So the idea is that because, like, people who are, have ancestral and family ties to a region where Israel is committing genocide do not share the British government's position in favor of that genocide.
Radicalized cell of Muslims who live in the UK.
Who, this is so wonderful.
Performatively reject any hope of like cultural assimilation and just like lean hardcore into campism. Is that it? Okay, yeah.
See, Vaush would never lean into campism. He would never decide to oppose sanctions intended to disrupt a genocide that he is on the record, quite rightly, opposing. Just because his, the state he cheers on, is the one carrying out this war to facilitate this genocide.
We don't have as much of that over here in the U.S. I mean, I'm sure there are some people like that, but there's a lot of irredentism in England. Yeah, it seems so. I guess if you live in a dying empire, you want to be anywhere but there, right? Wouldn't airstriking the Yemen risk escalating the conflict and expanding it over the region?
Well, yes, it would, actually. In fact, it doesn't risk that. It has done that. By starting a direct shooting war against Yemen, that is exactly what the U.S. has done. It doesn't risk expanding this. It has already expanded it. Because Yemen counts.
When you ask questions like that, what do you mean specifically? When you say the conflict, what are you referring to? And when you talk about it expanding over the region, what are you referring to? Like, conflicts aren't like magic. Like, there's systems that sort of guide the direction these things move in.
Well, yes, and the system that was that is guiding the direction of the genocide in Palestine is now bombing Yemen. So you could say that the system that is guiding the conflict, the system without which the conflict would basically be impossible, is expanding the conflict quite actively.
I guess a lot of people's understand. Okay, first and foremost, let's be clear. You know how people are saying that the Americans who are on board with bombing Yemen don't know where Yemen is?
Yeah, and that's probably true. Yeah, is Vaush going to try to find Yemen on a map now?
Americans who aren't on board with bombing Yemen also don't know where Yemen is, okay? Most of the lefties who you see online who are saying shit like, this is just the American empire, like, reinforcing Israel's desire to genocide, blah, blah, blah.
Which is literally what it is, Vaush. That's literally what it is. Because if the U.S. just wanted to end the sanctions, there's a very easy way to do that. You cut off Israel's weapons supply, and you ensure that there is full and unrestricted access for all humanitarian aid to Gaza. That's it. That's all they're saying. That's what they're saying is what, their off-ramp on this thing. That's all they're calling for. Do that. And, then you will know, and because you should do that anyway. You have a pre-existing legal and moral duty to do that already. So, you do that, and then you see what happens. Either they're telling the truth, that this is their motivation, which seems likely because they weren't doing this before the genocide. In which case they will just stop, and, Red Sea shipping will resume as, previously. Or they don't stop, which would actually be kind of surprising, because they hadn't been doing this before the genocide. They're not just itching to have a conflict with people who can, raise their entire country to the ground. And then you see what's going on after that. You know, I mean, they've been very clear on this. And yeah, I mean, this is, wow, hello, I don't know nothing. Is the... Yeah, I mean, he's also admitting that he knows what is actually at stake here. Because this is very much about the US starting a war against Yemen to defend Israel, you know, their and Israel's right to genocide Palestinians.
Like, most of those people learned about Yemen yesterday. A lot of them are like 16. They have no clue. And because they frame literally all conflicts the exact same way, the Houthis become like an oppressed minority fighting.
Well, they are. Like, they literally are. I mean, you just... fucking Vaush! This fucking guy. Just a minute ago, he was laughing about how bombing Yemen is sort of a tradition. Because it is. The U.S. has been, either directly or by proxy, carrying out mass murder against Yemen for a very long time. Ever since they decided to overthrow the shitty-ass government that the U.S. had imposed on them against their will. So yeah, actually, they are in this conflict. Like, people who are recovering from colonial occupation. I mean, you go back to the 60s when Britain was just openly torturing and taking hostages in Yemen in order to maintain control over it. So, yeah, Vaush, like, sometimes you do those Wikipedia streams where you learn about, like, where Israel is, and it's all exciting because we all get to watch you learning. Why don't you do one of those, but you're reading a fucking history book sometime?
Off the great American evil, of which Saudi Arabia is an extension. And
well, Saudi Arabia is a fucking extension.
To a large extent, that is certainly the case for Yemen broadly, because...
Yeah, actually. So, like... This is such an unforced bad take. He has, like... This is painful, because he has, like, the building blocks to get this right. And he hasn't assembled them, because it would require him to... like, break up with Brandon.
Because we have assisted in the sanctions and the war effort, and we have allowed Saudi Arabia to engage in a...
There aren't sanctions. There were no sanctions against Yemen for overthrowing the U.S.-imposed dictatorship. There weren't sanctions. That was a blockade. It kept out food, water, medicine, literally everything. Huge numbers of people died as a result. They still haven't recovered from that shit. Like, so, I mean, you're gonna pretend that that's somehow irrelevant to all this? I can't wait to hear why he thinks that that doesn't mean that actually Yemen is the underdog here.
Genocide, or at least, like, massively destructive behavior in Yemen. But that's not really, like, an endorsement of the Houthis, you know?
You don't have to endorse everything that they stand for to say that they're actually doing the right thing here. I mean, for a guy who stands U.S. imperialism all over the place while claiming that he's actually critical of it, you'd think that he was familiar with this idea. I mean, this is just the, like, reverse Caleb Maupin he's doing. Like, you can not endorse every single thing that the Ansar Allah movement in Yemen stands for. I will say, I don't know a whole lot about them other than the fact that they have enormous popular support there, and they overthrew a U.S.-imposed dictatorship, and they're doing the right thing in terms of Israel. Other than that, I don't know a whole lot about them, and I wouldn't be surprised if they have a whole lot of reactionary ideas. But I can't say for sure, because I haven't really looked at them. But that doesn't mean that everything they do is bad. That does not rule out the possibility that they can get one thing absolutely fucking right. Like, South Africa has a lot of shittiness. Okay. I mean, They have an extremely corrupt government that is extremely neoliberal. It is screwing over the working class for the benefit of a handful of, like, foreign mining companies. They have not taken any real principled stand on the genocide of Tigray in Ethiopia, amongst other genocides going on in Africa. But they have unequivocally taken the right stance on this. And it is possible to say that. I mean, this is also why I don't share, like, there are a lot of memes going around where just, like, South Africa is standing with all of humanity, and it's like, on this one thing, yeah, they're doing well. And they're taking in, you know, like, Haider Eid, I was really glad to see, is safe and sound, and in South Africa, because he's a dual citizen there. But, fucking hell.
This is just the problem that we keep facing over and over and over again. Being
that your takes suck, and people point it out?
A member of an oppressed group doesn't mean you're right about anything.
Okay, and how does this apply here? Are you saying that they are not right to be sanctioning Israeli shipping in order to disrupt the genocide? To cause economic damage, and they are causing economic damage. Israel is feeling it.
It just doesn't. You can be right, but it doesn't.
Well, yeah, you can be right. In this case, they are right, though. In this case, they fucking are right. And, I mean, this motherfucker, I mean, you don't get... I mean, for him, this, just because you're from an oppressed group doesn't mean you're always right bullshit, which nobody actually claims in the first place. That is just his version of the dog whistle, it's okay to be white. That's all that is. Fucking hog.
Doesn't mean you're right. There's nothing about suffering that makes your arguments better, you know? Like, you know, like the Confederates became an oppressed minority after we squashed them and engaged in reparations. Didn't. Does that make any of their whining about the
What the fuck did he just say? No, they fucking didn't. The Confederate... Wow, I mean...
Just the American Empire, like, reinforcing Israel's desire to genocide.
Oh, I took it back too far.
Arabia to engage in a genocide. An endorsement of the Houthi over and over and over again. Being a you can be right, but it doesn't mean you're right. There's nothing about suffering that makes your arguments better, you know? Like, you know, like, the Confederates became an oppressed minority after we squashed them and engaged in, like, reparations. Does that make any of their...
No, they fucking didn't. The oppressed minorities... Actually, I mean, you couldn't even really say minorities, because numerically, in a lot of places, they would have been the absolute majority. We're still black people and indigenous people. And he said, what did he call it? Reparation? No, it's called Reconstruction, you dickhead. And it was abandoned after like a year and a half as the fucking Klan, with the aid of the cops and the leniency of the Union troops, just terrorized black people out of exercising the rights that they had just been granted in the fucking in the Constitution. Yeah, I actually watched South Africa's entire initial submission. I thought it was really good.
Whining about the lost war, correct? No!
That's, like, seriously, this motherfucker really buys into white genocide shit.
Bully them harder, you know? Like,
not the same thing, motherfucker.
History doesn't work like that. It's just a tendency some people have to...
How the hell would you know what history would work like? You've not actually demonstrated any knowledge of it.
Automatically assign, like, righteousness to people who are in some way victimized.
Well, you're assigning righteousness to a regime that is a constant victimizer, though.
Notwithstanding the fact, by the way, that the Houthis are not really the victims in the context of Yemen's civil war.
It's not Yemen's civil war, and it was over a while ago. I mean, this is just wild, because, yeah, they are a popular movement that arose against an imperialist-imposed dictatorship. So, yeah, and the result of that has been that the U.S. and through Saudi Arabia has been like trying to starve Yemeni people to death as a to get revenge for overthrowing the dictatorship they imposed. That is River Rune. That is exactly what I was thinking about. I was thinking about how interesting it is that in this completely different context, we once again get this idea that white supremacists are the victims. That is like, I mean, that is one of the really consistent threads, is like finding ways for white supremacists to be the victims.
The Houthis have done some monstrously bad things to the innocent civilians. Slavery, child brides, they're not really...
Like, could you citation needed a little bit?
Like, it's not that simple, you know? But a lot of people...
Like, where are you getting that from?
Boil it all down because they engage in, unironically, the kind of, like, arrogant Western chauvinism that they accuse others of believing in by saying...
who engages in Western chauvinism? What, is he saying that the Yemeni government is engaging in... What the...
That, well, all Arabs are basically the same, right? So...
No, nobody's saying that.
Houthis must be the same as the Yemenis broadly, and like if one of them...
Well, actually, I mean, they do have, like, majority popular support. They are an extremely popular movement. They are a huge movement in Yemen, actually.
Them's oppressed, all of them are oppressed, you know? Like, are black people in America oppressed? Yeah, absolutely. But if you had, like, a random serial rapist who was black running around Detroit, people... Is that
wait, what?
Person in the right?
Holy shit. I mean, the dog whistles in this thing. I thought we were going to be watching him tie himself into fucking pretzels to explain why the genocide is bad, but trying to stop the genocide is bad. And instead, he's just doing a white nationalism here. He's just doing, this is his fucking Richard Spencer arc.
When the police arrest them? No, of course not, because because that's dumb. You know, I don't know.
Well, yeah, that is one consistent thing, Vaush. You don't know, so maybe shut the fuck up.
This keeps happening, man. Being from an oppressed group is literally Israeli justification for their crimes against the Palestinians. That's true, yeah.
Which is bullshit, because they are not a group that has ever been oppressed by the Palestinians. In fact, Palestinian Jews did not want the Zionists there. Palestinian Jews were actually low-key pissed off at the Zionists because when they started colonizing Palestine, it was ruining their good relations with their Muslim and Christian neighbors. And the result of that is that Zionist paramilitaries started targeting Palestinian Jews. Like...
Jews on a global level are objectively an oppressed group.
Okay, see, and here is an example of how one of the subtle ways that Zionism shapes the discourse. Because the thing is, one of the key ideas in Zionism... Yes, you heard what you thought you heard. I mean, he's just bringing in all sorts of white supremacist dog whistles in here. One of the Zionist tropes is that basically all Jews everywhere in the world, from the Kaifeng Jews in China to the Judeo-Malayalam speaking people in India to, you know, the people in the shtetls, like a lot of my ancestors, all have the exact same history. They all have the exact same social position. That Ashkenazi Jewish history is the history of all Jews. And that's simply not true. I mean, it just isn't. Like, in fact, historically, the Muslim world has been a place where European Jews have found sanctuary when white Christians were making their lives impossible. That's not to say that there weren't Arab Jews haven't had problems historically, but it really has not been this, the history is not the same as, like, just constantly expelling them from one end of the continent to the other and alternatively trying to convert or kill them. I mean, it just isn't the same history. This idea that all Jews in the world have the same history as Ashkenazi Jews like myself is a Zionist bullshit.
There's no way around that. If you disagree with that, that's anti-Semitic. I'm sorry, it is. Like, holy shit, you know?
I mean, it's just objectively wrong. I mean, he's doing a Zionism here.
And that is the excuse they use to do what they do with the Palestinians, that because they've been victimized, they have sort of unlimited permission to engage in this behavior.
I mean, not actually. Lately, the thing that they've been doing is saying that they are defending the West, and that if they don't exterminate Palestinians, Palestinians will take over the world.
I mean, we're going to see that with the tribunal. Have you seen Emma Vigeland's tweets? I mean, I saw one tweet of hers responding to a tweet of mine.
Oh, I mean, his chat points out that the phrasing that the uprising that brought the Houthis to power in Yemen is not really a civil war, because the only reason it's a war at all is that Saudi Arabia, i.e. a U.S. proxy, is doing everything possible to drag it out.
Tweeted out something like, man, it's a shame America got involved when they did. The Houthis might have been able to save Gaza had they been able to fire one more random salvo of rockets at a civilian vessel. And a bunch of people got mad at me for it.
Yeah, because that's bullshit. That is absolute bullshit, what you just said. You are just spreading genocidal propaganda. That's why people got mad at you. Like, because this is, I mean, for you it's just the fucking clicks. I get that, Vaush. It's all you give a shit about is your clout. But there are 2 million people whose lives, whose, like, future longevity is very much in question. And the only actual direct practical action being taken outside of Palestine to try to put a stop to the genocide is the Yemeni sanctions.
Which is very funny, because nothing that I said there was inaccurate. I like a lot of...
everything that you said there was inaccurate, and you're doing it in defense of genocide. The fact that you are so fucking ignorant that you may actually not realize that's what you're doing, that doesn't make it better. That just means that you should shut the fuck up more.
Them got mad in a statement where all I did was plainly describe what they were doing, which is funny because people get very defensive over a frank description of what the Houthis are doing. That is
literally not what they're doing. They are boarding Israeli vessels registered in Israel that are Israeli owned or are bound for or originating from Israel, and impounding them. That's what they're doing. And yes, there is a huge propaganda effort underway in the U.S. to avoid people noticing that that's what they're doing, because chances are a lot of people would hear that and say, actually, that kind of makes sense, because most people in the U.S. think that there should be not a genocide in Gaza.
Isn't like qualified with a bunch of dishonest, narratives. So what has Emma been tweeting? To stand with Israel when it's being charged with by post-apartheid said, I agree with this, blah, 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 blah. Sports? Imagine caring about sports. My goodness. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. I don't see any.
Oh, Namibia's statement was absolute just fucking fire. Because Germany decided to intervene in the proceedings in the International Court of Justice. And, their whole thing is that they did the Holocaust and therefore they have, the right to talk about what genocide is. And Namibia said, it's only been 2 fucking years since you acknowledged the genocide you did against us, and you still haven't paid us reparations. You need to sit the fuck down. He likes it when people get mad at him.
Anything about the Houthis? Sports stuff. Can you imagine? I'm vomiting. The Houthis have the ability to bottleneck the Red Sea. Have had...
Yeah, I mean, this is true. They have had the ability. They have not been sanctioning random ships. Yeah, this is an accurate take. The Houthis have had the ability to bottleneck the Red Sea since 2015, and they're not fresh off the Termit truck ableist slur. So I'm sure they've known that that could be a huge source of leverage. This refusal to even consider that Gaza might be their motivation is other ableist slur. I mean, a little bit much on the ableist slurs, but I mean, let's just see how Vaush manages to try to deal with that.
Had the ability to bottleneck the Red Sea since 2015, and they're not fresh off the turnip truck morons. So I'm sure they've known that could be a huge source of leverage. This refusal to even consider that Gaza might really be their motivation is bonkers. Even if Gaza was their motivation, it wouldn't matter.
It actually does kind of matter.
International maritime trade is a no-go. Can't...
Wait, okay, that's your thing? That's your fucking red line? Not genocide, not sanctioning, not sanctioning fucking vessels that are supplying the economy of a regime that is currently starving people in Gaza to death. 80% of the people experiencing catastrophic hunger in the world right now are in Gaza. 80% in the whole fucking world. Catastrophic hunger is when you could just basically drop any minute because you've not because you're that malnourished. Like, I mean, but your fucking red line, Vaush, is international maritime trade. So what do you think happens when the U.S. starts an all-out war in the Red Sea? You think that helps maritime trade? Yeah, I mean, sounding like a fucking... Where's your... Yeah, I mean, sounding like a fucking British imperial spokesman from the Edwardian days. Now, I am willing to countenance a certain amount of mass murder in a good cause, but I really cannot stomach. I really will not abide any disruption to maritime trade. Like, I mean, what the fuck is this take?
With that, but also the fact that they've lied about which targets they're going after.
No, they haven't.
Switching between we're only blockading Israel to we're going after everyone.
No, that is not true. That is actually a lie. They have been very consistent. There was exactly one ship that they got wrong. They had outdated intel on it. But what they've said from the beginning is Israeli vessels, which is vessels registered in Israel or Israeli owned, and vessels bound for or originating from Israel, and they have abided by that.
Sort of like cast doubt upon their sincerity. Also, the fact the Houthis historically have not really done much to like help Palestinians.
You mean because historically they were busy getting wrecked by Saudi Arabia? So you're saying like the fact that they have not actually... Yeah, I mean, historically, the Houthis have not actually been in power for very long, actually. And a lot of that time, they've had a lot of problems that they were dealing with the U.S. and Saudi Arabia trying to starve Yemen to death. So, yeah. This is, like, the one thing... And, again, the fact that, what else are they going to do? What they've got is the position, they're in a position to bottleneck the Red Sea. That's what they can do. So, I mean, they are barely surviving as it is. It's not like they can organize a fucking whip round. It's the poorest country in the region. They've been systematically starved out. They're barely managing on their own. Like, what else are they going to do? And also, I mean, like, seriously, what else would they be doing? And this did not actually start until after the genocide had been going on for a fair while.
Like they're both in a diplomatic and like real politic level. They haven't really engaged that much.
I wonder why. I wonder why. Could they have had other things to do?
Taking advantage of the situation in Gaza as a pretext, you know, like they're using it as an excuse to bolster their you know, their cred essentially. I don't know, man.
Like, this is what you've decided to condemn. Not the fact that the U.S. has openly said, yeah, that there's no, they don't actually believe their own rationale for the genocide, but they're going to continue doing it. Not the fact that Israel has said that no matter what the International Court of Justice does, they're going to continue this genocide. Not the fact that they have now destroyed the last hospital in Gaza, the last university in Gaza. But what you're condemning is sanctions on Israel. Like, what the fuck? What should they do, Vaush? What would you be okay with them doing as somebody whose governability is a sine qua non of the U.S. being able to carry out this genocide? Like, literally, all of us who are sitting here in the U.S., the only reason that this shit can happen is that the U.S. is not busy putting out fucking fires here. Our governability is what makes this possible. And as somebody with a platform, like, he is in a position to influence that a bit. And he influences this in the direction of, like, fucking apologetics for U.S. genocide. I didn't even notice I said something funny. What was the bit that was funny?
I have what some may consider a dumb idea, but here it is. Stop the bombing of Gaza and the attacks and commercial shipping will end. Why not try that approach?
Yeah, why not? Let's hear it, Vaush. Why not?
Can you imagine if there was an injustice happening and then somewhere else in the world somebody like robbed a bank, fired guns at a bunch of people, but like miraculously didn't hit them, and they were like, yeah, if you want us to not rob banks, why don't you stop that other crisis?
So, okay, so he's just adopting the U.S. propaganda line that the sanctions on Israeli shipping are nothing to do with the genocide. That he doesn't, but here's the thing. The U.S. has a fucking pre-existing obligation not to do genocide. Everybody does. Everybody also has a legal obligation to prevent genocide. Which, at the moment, Yemen is like the only country doing anything about. And, why? So, why? But still, Vaush, you haven't actually said why not.
Like, why should I take that at face value? Why should I care?
Because it's genocide, and genocide is bad, and supposedly you're against it.
Like, why? Why would I do that? Why wouldn't I stop both things? And if America isn't...
Because the point is that if you stop the committing genocide, then maybe the sanctions intended to increase the cost of committing genocide will end. That's the idea here. That's the whole point. This is a level of just deliberate obtuseness that is just really remarkable. I didn't think angles could be this obtuse. Thought that, like, most obtuse an angle could be was like 179 degrees.
Going to stop the crisis in Gaza, which they're not, because America's evil, then at the very least we can stop the bank robbery, right? Like, just because...
What? What the... Well, maybe we cannot stop the genocide that the U.S. is committing, but at least we can stop the sanctions against Israel that are intended to disrupt the genocide. This is what this motherfucker just said. Back.
Like, why? Why would I do that? Why wouldn't I stop both things? And if America isn't going to stop the crisis in Gaza, which they're not...
The crisis. It's been downgraded to the crisis.
Evil, then at the very least we can stop the bank robbery, right? Like, just because the crisis isn't going to be stopped doesn't mean
The crisis. Fuck you, man. The crisis.
I don't want the bank robbery to be stopped. Like, that's...
what's the crisis, Vaush? Could you tell us a little bit about the crisis? Did they have an earthquake, maybe? Was it a tsunami? What's the crisis, Vaush?
not that you know, you can like you can still want that. I don't have to accept the existence of a bad thing just because another bad thing exists, you know? I don't have
That's
like
not the point, you absolute fucking drongo. The sanctions, which to him are a bad thing, because, I mean, there's nothing matters to Vaush more than, like, the shipping lanes, because, again, he is a 19th century British Foreign Office bureaucrat, apparently, in this timeline. So the sanctions are a bad thing, and the genocide is a bad thing, so bad that it dare not speak its name, at least in Vaush's stream. So why wouldn't I just do something about the one? Well, why?
yeah, it would be like, yeah, stop until major Western corporations stop contributing to the climate crisis. I will be like bombing elementary schools. You know, if you
no, like try a better analogy. I mean, this is literally, what? They're sanctioning Israeli shipping, and they're doing it until humanitarian aid is allowed fully and unrestricted into Gaza. And he's, like, deliberately trying to come up with the most totally unrelated things for his fucking analogies.
Hey, how about instead of stopping the elementary school bombings, you stop the climate change crisis that's causing the bombings? You know, like it's just it doesn't.
Well, yeah, but the point is, first of all, like leaving aside just how immensely shitty that analogy is, the point here, Vaush, is that the easy way to stop the sanctions on Israeli shipping that you're just so desperate to avoid acknowledging that that's what they are, that you're just kind of lying. The way to stop them, the easiest way to do it without killing a huge number of people that the US has been killing for quite a long time by proxy, without starting a fucking war, would be to stop the genocide that the US is committing. Oh, I'm sorry, the crisis. The fucking crisis. I mean, and then the fucking sanctions stop. That's the idea. And in fact, let me just note that international law does not just allow you to use force willy-nilly in these situations. You have to exhaust alternatives. I mean, it's not clear that international law would allow the US to use force anyway in this situation, but you always are required to exhaust all alternatives not involving the use of force. In this case, for example, ending the genocide by cutting off the supplies that Israel needs in order to commit genocide, and allowing unrestricted access for humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. That would be a non-violent alternative, and you do have to exhaust it. And the US isn't trying it because the whole reason they're doing this is because they're fighting for the right to genocide Palestinians, because Palestinians are in their way. Like, until October 7th, they were very content to pretend that the Palestinians didn't really exist anymore. That's what this whole Abraham Accords normalization bullshit was. They were saying that the Palestinians were a spent force, they don't have to take them into account. All the US puppet dictatorships in the region were happily lapping that right up and just abandoning all pretense of caring about the Palestinians. And now the Palestinians made it clear they're not a spent force after all, and also Israel is way overrated militarily.
Shouldn't we try negotiating first with the Houthis? We asked them to stop multiple times. Yeah, but...
but the thing is, they asked you to stop genociding the Palestinians. Like, that's a fair swap, wouldn't you say? Especially since the US has a pre-existing obligation to do that.
But they're not bombing elementary schools? That's right. They're threatening international maritime trade, which is significantly more destructive than bombing elementary schools.
Jesus Christ. What a fucking ghoul. Like, international maritime trade, that's what's worth more than the lives of 2 million people in Gaza to him.
Have they even caused a fatality yet? The harm...
They haven't. actually. The U.S. has. The U.S. has caused fatalities.
In the harm in piracy is not...
This isn't piracy, motherfucker. And if you're so horny for international maritime trade, why aren't you talking about the fact that the U.S. has had these sort of blockades on Cuba, on the DPRK, on Venezuela? I don't remember you caring about international maritime trade then, Vaush. Now all of a sudden, when Yemen decides to sanction Israeli vessels and vessels bound for and originating from Israel in order to stop a genocide, now all of a sudden you're fucking Christopher Columbus.
The sailors that get killed. You could kill thousands of innocent civilian sailors and not even put a dent in the damage that would be done by disrupting international supply lines. You know, the harm.
Whoa.
Present here, like again, people like massively underestimate the extent to which the world.
Well, I think we've also gotten here. I have talked and I've written about this, about the importance of disrupting the supply line of the genocide in Gaza. A supply line that happens to run right through this fucking country. And I think he just gave us the answer. He just said he doesn't give... I mean, between human lives and the profits that the supply lines guarantee, he'll take the supply line anytime.
The world relies on this trade. They tried to kill people, they're just too incompetent. I mean,
No, they didn't, actually. They have very specifically avoided that. They are not incompetent, which is why they've actually managed to maintain themselves in power, despite the fact that major regional powers and the world's leading imperialist power are trying to get rid of them. They're not fucking incompetent. Like, I mean, this is just such racist shit. The assumption is, I mean, and this is also like the sort of, actually, it comes back to like Henry Kissinger, who said, war is not an Arab game. The assumption is that, you know, if Arabs don't hit somebody, it's because they can't hit, as opposed to them missing on purpose because their goal is not actually to kill people. Jesus.
They did fire rockets at ships, you know, like it's not a point to
It's called a warning shot, motherfucker.
Again, the entire UN is fine with this. Everyone's fine with this, even Russia and China.
Yeah, exactly. Only the US, the people who are doing genocide, have an objection to this. I mean, so again, what was that you were saying about isolationism? Because it seems like the isolationist take here is to stand with Israel and the US against the literally in the entire fucking world.
Is harming Israel's supplies the only move they have? They're not harming Israel's supplies.
Yes, they fucking are. That's the whole point, and Israel has acknowledged it. Their economy is in the shitter. Part of that is because they called up so many reserves to do this genocide, but part of that is also that now ships bound for Israel are massively delayed because they're having to detour around Africa. They don't have access. Israel, for the first time in its existence, has no Suez Canal. Yes, it is damaging them.
They haven't gone after a single ship that was, like, inbound to Israel.
Yes, they have, actually. And originating from Israel. They have done that repeatedly. That is all they're fucking doing, apart from one time where they got some bad intel.
Israel primarily trades with Europe, you know? They can't block that trade.
Actually, Israel has a lot of trade with China. I mean, Israel relies kind of heavily on the Suez Canal, because East Asia is kind of important to international trade, since a lot of the world's manufacturing happens there.
Like, they don't have control over that area. They're south of Israel's ports, not north of them.
That's, again, like, has this motherfucker never heard of the Suez Canal? Like, they are literally, there are two ways, see, unlike Gaza, for who, I mean, there's only one, they've only got one port. Israel, there are two ways to get access to Israel's ports. One is through the Med. The other is through the Suez Canal, which Israel has never been without, because Israel isn't as old as the Suez Canal. Okay. And the Suez Canal is kind of important, because, like, Saudi Arabia is downstream on the Suez. Like, if you want oil from Saudi, and you're in Israel, you kind of need the Suez. Because otherwise they have to go all the way around Africa, and that takes a little bit of time.
Like, they're just shut up, you know? But they're not doing anything to stop Israel meaningfully. They're just doing terrorism.
No, they are. Okay. So, on the one hand, this is such a disruption to international maritime trade, which Vaush is, like, seriously horny for, that the U.S. has the right to just start bombing the shit out of Yemen. On the other hand, they're not doing anything effective anyway. Like, which is it, Vaush? Which button you gotta push?
Lends doubt to the credibility of their, their crusade here.
Oh, crusade, motherfucker! Like, not... Okay, is that a dog whistle, or is he that ignorant?
For terrorism? Yeah, no kidding. What did campus think about the fact that China and Russia supports the strikes? There's no consistency. They'll deny.
Well, Vaush is a campist. I mean, it's funny how this term is only really used by liberals to describe people who do not support U.S. imperialism. But, I mean, what he's doing here is absolutely campism.
Deny that they support the strikes. They'll pretend they don't. The Houthis didn't happen in a vacuum. We, the US and UK, are kind of responsible for their existence. Sure, but that has nothing to do with that, right? Like, I agree, and I think that we...
Yeah, that's history. What are you bringing history into it? I mean, can't Vaush just, like, support a genocide without people bringing context and history and facts into it? Like, come on, Vaush's chat. He's trying to do... He's on his bullshit.
We should change our Middle Eastern, like, foreign policy, but that doesn't mean, like, no matter how many bad...
of course, our Middle Eastern foreign policy is fucking evil, but that doesn't mean people in the region are allowed to resist it, because that would harm international maritime trade.
Things we've done, that doesn't mean we have to then allow them to do a bad thing, you know?
Yeah, just because of all the bad things we've done doesn't mean that we should stop doing bad things or anything.
You know, you can argue hypocrisy, and you should. Hypocrisy...
Yeah, I mean, I'm arguing hypocrisy right now. Except that your position is so fucking muddled at this point that, I mean, apart from, like, genocide apparently good, Arabs resisting genocide not good... I really can't completely work out what your fucking position is. Oh, also, you fucking want to have international maritime trades babies. That's clear. Like, I forget. What the hell was I even just saying?
Them to do a bad thing, you know? You can argue hypocrisy, and you should. Hypocrisy is...
Yeah, I mean, that's what it was. Yeah, it's hard to actually argue hypocrisy with him, because you have to actually figure out what the fucking standard he is applying here is, in order to determine whether he is actually holding up to that standard. And he doesn't seem to have a standard, apart from America good. Like, when America do genocide, that good thing. When Arab do resistance to genocide, that bad thing.
It's present, you know. We shouldn't be stopping Israel. We're not. We shouldn't have supported the Saudis killing Yemenis, but we did.
Well, the Saudis supported them. The Saudis do what the U.S. says. And what the hell are the Yemenis? Does he not know what the people from Yemen are called? And he's gonna, like, accuse people who support the sanctions of not knowing where Yemen is. He doesn't even know what people from Yemen are called. It's Yemeni. It's not a hard one, because practically every fucking country in the region does this. You add an I to the end of the country's name.
That's valid. But at no point do you have to throw your hands up and go, well, like, that would be like if you had a bunch of white cops in a racist city, right? A city that had a long history of...
Oh, this is gonna go well. I'm sure that there's not going to be anything problematic forthcoming now. We got a good take incoming.
Pressing black people, and like the cops tend to be really like partial, like they tend to let white criminals go but not black criminals, and then a black guy starts like a bunch of kids or whatever, and then like the cops go in, you're like, oh wow,
what is this Willie Horton bullshit? Fucking Vaush Limbaugh here.
Well, why don't you go after the other things? It's like, okay, well, yeah, the cops should go after other stuff as well. I agree. There should be, like, more equality. But you don't solve that by, like, letting...
This isn't about more equality. The U.S. is doing genocide in the Middle East, in Gaza, having also done genocide against Yemen. Yemen is trying to stop that genocide. Like, this isn't about equality. This is the U.S. should stop doing genocide if they want people to stop resisting the U.S. doing genocide.
The just get away. You know, that's just not... It's like the systemic critique of the behavior of the police.
This isn't the systemic critique.
While also believing that in this instance, whether it be by partiality or impartiality, this invocation of the law is justified.
But this isn't an invocation of the law. You're literally arguing against it. Because if you invoke the law says the U.S. isn't allowed to do this. The law actually says that what the U.S. is doing is a capital offense. Actually. The law says that all states have a duty to prevent genocide. A duty that basically nobody is taking on, it's worth noting, except for Yemen at the moment. Because the U.S. is in a position to thwart any attempt at international legal accountability. They do it all the time. It's why the file at the International Criminal Court has been gathering dust for years. So this is not the systemic critique. I mean, in fact, I haven't heard Vaush make a systemic critique here. This is... quite simply, the U.S. should not be doing this. The U.S. should not be bombing Yemen, and the U.S. should not be genociding Palestinians. Like, why shouldn't we be saying that the U.S. should not be doing either of those things? I mean, like, legally, they really shouldn't, because if we're invoking the law, because apparently, I mean, the only thing that Vaush likes more than international maritime trade is the fucking law. The law says that the U.S. has to exhaust peaceful means, which in this case means ending the genocide. End the genocide and see if the sanctions end. That's it. If they don't end, then there's another that's another situation. But there's every reason to believe they will end, and there's every reason to believe that the U.S. also believes they would end, because if the U.S. thought that they weren't serious, the best way to fucking call their bluff would be to end the genocide and see what happens. That's how when you want to know whether an offer is serious, you accept it. Because if you don't think that they're actually going to follow through on that offer, then you will find that out. If you reject an offer you don't think is for real in the first place, you don't really get to verify that.
The cop can stop them immediately, or airstrikes can...
Yeah, he really needs to not wade into these waters, because, I mean, international maritime trade depends on him not wading in the water.
Airstrikes cannot. Well, I mean, yeah, it's more complicated than a single guy being arrested, but our airstrikes can probably do something. Now,
yeah, they're killing a lot of people.
Now, if our airstrikes end up being totally ineffective, that's a valid argument. Like,
no, well, I mean, so the genocide that the U.S. is committing and shouldn't be, that's not a valid argument. But if all the killing of Yemenis, in addition to Palestinians, is ineffective, in the sense that the U.S. doesn't get what the U.S. wants, because that is the measure of whether it is morally okay to Vaush. I mean, so what he's saying is that let's get back to that fucking bank robber. Well, you know, so the bank robber is robbing banks, probably to get some money out of them. And so the question is, according to Vaush, using his moral standard, is, In determining whether the robberies are right or wrong, the only question is, two questions. A, did the robber get away with it? And B, how much money did they get away with? Because if the only thing that matters for whether it is okay to murder fucking Yemenis and Palestinians is whether the U.S. gets what they want out of it, then, I mean, then you are in a fucking horrifying moral universe that is inhabited by Thomas Friedman. Yes, he called them Yemenis.
That's a valid critique. If this whole thing pans out in a way where we weren't able to meaningfully stop the Houthis, then I think that's a reasonable thing to sort of like invoke as a counter argument. But
yeah, not the genocide, not the 2 million lives at stake. That's, because we all know the U.S. is evil. But that's why you've got to root for the U.S. when the U.S. goes and kills even more people.
But not the other stuff. It's not completely stopping trade. The other route takes 10 extra days.
Yeah, that's another point. And that is a difference to the situation in Gaza, where they can't get any boats, because Israel will hijack any boat that tries to deliver aid to them. They cannot receive any maritime traffic. Whereas Israel can get boats, they just can't use the Suez right now. And, I mean, it's really impressive that he's avoided the issue of whether having an outright war in the Red Sea is making it easier or harder for international maritime trade to pass through there.
Saying 10 extra days is an incredibly big deal. What Houthis have done is make international shipping more expensive, and that's why the whole world is fine with murking them? Yes.
Except the whole world is not. I mean, the whole world in this case is the U.S. and Israel.
Of course. But what do you think making trade more expensive means?
Well, it might mean putting a price tag on genocide in this case. And here's the thing. This is where he really falls. I mean, he falls apart in so many different ways that it's actually, like, I don't even know where all the bits of him are lying. But he can't decide whether this is destroying international trade or totally ineffectual. It is either of these things, depending on which one he can use best in a particular rhetorical situation to justify the U.S. Committing acts of aggression against Yemen.
Means it takes more time and human effort, which means that it's harder to do, which lowers the efficiency of trade, which means that the speed
Who gives
of,
a shit?
Shipping vessels, like circulating their whole route, takes significantly longer, which means,
like, 80% of all people facing catastrophic hunger are in Gaza. People are already dropping dead of hunger in Gaza. They're eating fucking grass and tree leaves just to have something. If even a little bit of food is found, you got 1,000 people showing up trying to get a little bit of it just to have something in their stomachs. Israel, wonderful, just courageous soldiers that they have there, who, they can't handle a bunch of young guys in tracksuits with homemade weapons. But they do have the wherewithal to open fire and just gun down huge numbers of people who are just trying to get some fucking food. And this motherfucker is here, worried about the fact that, that a boat will take longer to reach Israel.
Means that fewer deliveries can be made. Making things take longer, making them more expensive is a threat, Again, you might get your Funko...
Killing 2 million people's a threat too, Vaush. I think you'll find.
Pops 10 days later, and the shipping might take a little bit more, whatever. But there are people who rely on medicine and grain. And
to name 2 things that Palestinians don't have access to in Gaza. God, I mean, this guy must have, like, some sort of, like, shisha set up, except that he farts into it, because he wants to smell the gas out of his own ass. I mean, look at how fucking proud of himself is. He's found a way to justify genocide without ever even approaching argumentative coherence.